now I'm going to try to trace back, save this. I'm going to try to like trace back little ray and see where it's getting tripped up. So if I look here, I've got this event ID. I think this is the little ray event. So pull that up. Yes, this ID is this ID. So this is the event that went through, and we can see that it has, if I look at the companies array, right, you can see multiple company IDs. So now I've pinned down the issue even further here. And I know that at the start of this workflow, we're getting the details of the event, but we're only getting the details of one of the companies. And so I'm going to copy this to editor. And what I need to happen is I need it to search both companies. I still need a batch reading of the contacts and the deals that are on those companies. So once I've kind of captured the issue and I've captured really what's going on, which is the like capturing this parent-child relationship, I try to define what I actually want. So, you know, the outreach brief for Little Ray, which currently only contains the relationship with Fort Fry, it should have recognized that Little Ray is a child company within a restaurant group. There are contacts on both Little Ray and the parent company, Fort Fry. And in the outreach brief, I would want to note, hey, here's offline's relationship. We have this parent company in our relationship and this child company in our relationship. And here's how to reach out to the parent company, and here's how to reach out to the child company. So we really need like a more elaborate structure when it's a restaurant group. And that's important, because part of the whole reason that you do this agentic stuff is to capture the nuance of these different relationships. So first I'm going to go to the execution. Let me just verify that this is Little Ray. It is. So let me get this execution URL. And then I'm going to come back here, and I'm essentially going to, in the course of this execution, I uncovered a pretty big issue. So that kind of captures what I just wrote in there. I'm going to go into plan mode. Before jumping straight into editing N8N, grab the execution details, or let me help you if the context is too much, and go and investigate Little Ray and Fort Fry Restaurant Group and understand what I understand before you try to go in and fix the workflow. It's really important that we don't disrupt the core usefulness of the workflow when it's not a complex relationship like this, while still being able to support a complex parent-child relationship. So let's see what we get here. Okay, so now we have a plan. Looks complicated. So okay, I'm reading through this and I'm thinking, okay, like this is pretty programmatic. This may require some judgment. Anytime that there's a little bit of almost human judgment involved here, this feels like it could be an AI setup instead of a deterministic code setup. So that's my only note that I'm going to make here. Oops, I was trying to copy this part. This part may be useful to use an AI agent so that the agent can just evaluate the parent-child relationship. I don't want to overuse AI, but it seems to me that the AI could just look at the companies and the AI restaurant group fields and make a simple determination about the relationship. If you're going to use an AI agent node, make sure you use a similar node to the one that we already have after our existing AI agent that make sure the JSON is parsed correctly. Okay, I'm pretty happy with the way it seems to be understanding that. All right, this thing has been going for a while now. So if I just kind of scroll up, you'll be able to see, here's where I approved the plan. And since then, we've had several different iterations of updates, several different compactings of the conversation. I'm definitely very curious about how this is going to go, because when I see that many sequential large token fetches and then conversation compacts, I start to get a little nervous about the quality. So let me pop back over here. Let's look at the no context branch and let's see what this thing made. Okay, so this looks pretty crazy. Let's see. I'm going to try to clean this thing up and let's see if this makes sense. Okay, when I read these flows, I sort of try to imagine, I try to map them to how I would do them as a human. So, you know, if I were to open up that event, that Little Ray's event, you know, I did. I looked up in the top right corner and I said, okay, let me think about both of these companies. Let me open these two companies. Mentally, let me figure out the relationship between these two companies, right? Which is what this AI hierarchy should do. Let me fix this. Don't know why it tends to do this. That's a later me problem. Then I would want to look at the deals for each company, and I would want to look at the context for each company. So, you know, this isn't necessarily wrong. There's some weird stuff going on here with merging. I'm certainly nervous about the fidelity here, but I mean, I think conceptually this makes sense. The problem I start to run into with a workflow this big is it's really hard to keep troubleshooting it with AI because the workflow is so big, right? It's just starting to feel like a mess. What I'm thinking about is how do I validate and troubleshoot this flow now that it's become so sprawling? Sometimes when I see an output like this, I just have to go take a walk. It's too crazy. All right. So I went and took a walk because this freaked me out a little bit. And what I thought about while I was walking is fundamentally there's two companies here. There's like the human process, which is the true north, is that when I open up an event, like the Little Ray event, I immediately load this context into my head that Little Ray and Ford Fry are a parent-child relationship, and so I need to spider out from there, right? And what Cloud Code did here is it ran that hierarchy analysis as sort of a parallel chain with all this other stuff. And what I'd like to do is have the event comes in. We recognize that it's a multi-company situation, right? So we sort of like move this over. And then for each one of these companies, we iterate through this whole process of get the deals, get the contacts, iterate through the contacts, and get all of the summary of the engagement. And then we bring all that together into the email. And so the email will essentially say why we're reaching out, what we found about the parent company, what we found about the child company, and then how to reach out to the parent company and the child company. So that's what I'm gonna try to do here. We'll see how that goes. So let me go back over to Claude. Let's go back to plan mode. So I reviewed the implementation and I think it's too complex. If we work backwards from the email that we want, the email should say, when we recognize there's a parent-child relationship, the email should say why we're reaching out, what we found about the parent company, what we found about the child company, how to reach out to the parent company, how to reach out to the child company. Because that's what we want as the output, and because we want the simplest, most easily debuggable middle section possible, what we should do is when the event comes in, we should check and see if there are multiple companies. And if so, we should immediately feed it to the AI agent to determine the hierarchy. And we should go ahead and label those companies parent-child. And then for each one of these parent and child companies, we should run it through a big loop that gets the deals, the contacts, the contact engagements, and packages all of that up. So that by the time we get to the end, where we're aggregating the results, we basically have why we're reaching out, and then we have all of the information about each company nested underneath it. So of course it's going to tell me I'm right. Doesn't mean I'm right. Okay. So Claude asked me a couple questions. I've answered those questions, and let's see what it's saying here. So current workflow is too complex. Yes. Why we're reaching out. We found out about the parent company. We found out the child company. Yep. How to reach out. Yes. Yes. Okay. Start. Get event details. Check multiple companies. Great. Okay. So it looks like Claude has attempted to rebuild. I'm actually surprised at how much faster this was to just rebuild from scratch than it was to edit the other thing. So I'm just going to look over the architecture here. So I see the multiple company, a hierarchy determination, which looks good. All right, let's just see what happens here. So we got to has deals true, batch read. It looks like that, yeah, okay. So there are these sort of unnecessary true, false, has deals chunks. I don't know why that would be necessary. Yeah, let me just go back here. Okay, this is looking pretty good. The one issue here is that there are never situations where there shouldn't be deals or contacts. That would indicate an issue upstream in this workflow before we even get here. So if we strip that stuff out, the workflow should be a lot simpler. So let's see what it does there. So it's removed the those like defensive nodes. Great. Okay, so now going back to the workflow, there was an error here in the build email HTML node. So I need to check and see how huge this JSON payload is, and I have a feeling it's way too big. It is 142,000 tokens, way too big. I don't know why we're ending up with so much information in this loop. And so what I started doing here is going through, I found this tool called JSON Crack, where you can actually visualize the data structure of something. So we start really simple with getting the event details. Cool. And then we do this read of companies. Fine. What I notice in the reading of companies is that we do have this HubSpot parent company ID. And so we should actually be able to make that parent company determination without needing the AI agent. So this is sort of how I'm thinking about this. If I throw a note on here, I always have these like issues. Let me turn it red. So we just have this data bloat. And by the time we get here, we have 142,000 tokens worth of data. It's just way too much. So what I'm going to do here is I actually think we can get rid of all of this. So I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to say, okay, so we have two problems with this current implementation. The first one is that it actually does look like we can use the HubSpot parent company data field, which looks like this, to determine the parent-child relationship instead of using an agent. That was a bad architectural decision on my part. So we can remove that entire agentic piece. And then I'm concerned with the amount of bloat in the data as it flows through these different nodes. Because there's a bug now in the build email HTML node, and the node before it, the aggregate all companies node, has 194,000 tokens worth of data in it, and I can't even post it in and show it to you because it's so large. So we really need to think through how we're passing data around in this workflow and how we could potentially streamline that. Okay, so Claude was able to rebuild this with a much more streamlined workflow, which makes me feel a lot better. And I went ahead and ran it for a really complex restaurant group. So it's basically eliminated that AI agent. It's doing 21 contact loops. It's successfully getting them all the way to the outreach email. The note is breaking. So I've got in my little issues, my new issues tracker here, two things. One is that the note failed, which I can kind of come back here and try to troubleshoot what's going on there. It looks like it's referencing, this is actually pretty simple. It's referencing a payload that is actually back here. So it needs to grab this one. So this is build HTML email dot payload dot JSON, I believe. Let me see, what is it? Oh, dot item dot JSON. Okay, well, that's what happens when I try to write stuff myself. Okay, so that one should be fixed in the future. And then when I looked at this in the email, this is exactly what I wanted. So again, going back to the mindset of a research AI agent passing, an outreach brief to an SDR. This is exactly what I think an SDR would want. There's a reason we're reaching out. There's all this data about the parent restaurant group, which is a really complex, large group. So these are the things that we've worked with them on in the past, going all the way back to 2019. These are the active deals that we have in a whole bunch of variety of stages. And then these are all of the contacts that we have on the parent company. So there's 21, all with their own summaries. And then here's the contacts that we have specifically on East End Bistro with the parent restaurant group information. So super, super, super cool. As I was going through this, I'm just kind of continuing to QA it, and I noticed something that jumped out to me. Jennifer is a really good friend of mine, and I know I've talked to her since 3 years ago, right? And so I went in and dug into that and found that there's an error in my engagement finder sub workflow. This is the workflow that pulls information out of HubSpot and summarizes the deal activity. So I'm going to troubleshoot that, but I think for now, kind of retracing my steps here, this is a good milestone in this overall journey, because inside of the offers process, inside of conducting outreach and building this outreach engine, there's this cascading. You want to build this outreach engine, which means you need to use AI enrichment and HubSpot data to build this outreach brief, right? Which is what I've been working on, and making that work for an individual restaurant. So I can kind of for an individual restaurant, and now for a complex restaurant group. At this point, it's mostly debugging. So that's where I'm going to pick up.